us gather together and experience the goodness of God. I'm Pastor Trey Comstock. Normally at this point in the show, I talk about how we're going to begin with our scripture of the week. This week, we're not going to talk about a scripture. Instead, this week, Pastor Emily Larson and I are going to talk about season 2 of Shiny Happy People, entitled A Teenage Holy War, because it turns out we lived in that holy war. But first, let me give you the very big picture of what this documentary series was about. So, Shiny Happy People season 1 was the documentary that was about the birtherism movement, was about the quiverful movement and how you've got to have as many kids as possible, and Gothardism and the Duggars. It was about that. And that was in no way about my life, other than I was an avid fan of the Duggars because I thought they were ridiculous and funny until it all stopped being ridiculous and certainly stopped being funny. When it turned out that Josh Duggar was a criminal, just a serial criminal. It was really, and then the ways it got covered up, it all got really dark. And so I had a connection to that story because I was a person with cable in the late 2000s. And Sydney and I would watch a lot of Duggar content and go, haha, that's ridiculous. As we were two married, childless people about the same age as Josh and Anna. And then I was just on my television one night, and I normally don't even look at the algorithmic feed, but the Vizio algorithmic feed, it was Shiny Happy People season 2. And I went, great. Couldn't be more excited. Here we go. Is this going to be more about the Duggars? I had no context for what was about to happen. And then I turned it on. And it turned out it was about the part of the evangelical teen movement that both you and I are from.
Yes. It was uncomfortable to see how much I was in this documentary, or my childhood was represented in this documentary.
And so the super high level is it's about this organization called Teen Mania, led by this guy named Ron Luce. Now, if you didn't grow up in that corner of evangelical world, these might not be household names for you. And I'll be honest, these specific ministries were not household names for me. But the tone and what they were doing, very much at home for me. And so Ron Luce starts Teen Mania Ministries that had these big Christian music festivals called Acquire the Fire. They then also had this go on a mission trip for several months to international locations called Global Expeditions. And then they had an highly intense internship program / school for Christian training mission something called the Honor Academy. And the idea was it was a 1 to 2 to 3. You go to Acquire the Fire, you become inspired to go on a global expedition, and then you join the Honor Academy and give a year of your life to being the boots on the ground leadership of this thing. There was a great
to major in God.
To major in God. Yeah, that's
to major in God. That was the quote.
There was a great quote in the thing about global expeditions that was something like, do you want to go on a mission trip with the coolest 23-year-old you've ever met?
Yep.
Yes, as it turns out.
Go with the cool kids.
And so that's where it starts. And then over time, the intensity ratchets up, and the intensity ratchets up, and the intensity ratchets up. And this becomes increasingly about suffering and preparing yourself for martyrdom. The abuses at the Honor Academy just increase, and they're going through they're getting dropped out in the middle of nowhere 2 days away from the camp in Lindale, Texas, and they have to somehow carry a 6-foot cross back to the camp, and then it ratchets up again, and now there's this Navy SEAL type training where they're wearing helmets and get assigned numbers, and they're walking through a 30-foot trench 10 feet underground filled mostly with water while covered in Madagascar hissing cockroaches. That's
Fear Factor style. It's very much Fear Factor, which was also popular at the time.
Right. And it started out as this thing about rejecting the decadence of kind of late 90s, early 2000s culture. You know, this is your era of Britney Spears. This is your era of like where MTV has become like super mainstream. This is the late 90s. You know, this is the era of Girls Gone Wild advertising on cable TV aimed at teenagers. Like it's that. And so it's like a rejection of that, and like really focus on God, and then living really intensely for God, and then being part of a movement to change the world for God. And then eventually, like where the documentary goes, because it's where Ron Luce goes, this all becomes like very explicitly political.
Very
it doesn't
hyper-political.
start, I mean, you could argue that it starts there because nothing is apolitical, but like it doesn't start there. It ends up there kind of in the late 2000s. And eventually a bunch of alumni start posting about the truly heinous things that were happening in the Honor Academy, and that causes the whole thing to topple. That is like, so like episode 1 is largely about like Acquire the Fire, and about just like the energy of the time, and what it felt like to be an evangelical or evangelical related teenager, you know, from the era where we were evangelical or evangelical related teenagers. You know, the story really kind of picks up in like largely in the like mid 90s. By the late 90s, you and I are teenagers, and like, and so like it's about that. And then episode 2 is really about like the abuses of the Honor Academy, and like the intensity of that, and like the growing push towards like a really martyrdom centric culture, that like really you're expendable, that it's like this really great joy to die for Christ. And this is the thing that we're just like yelling at rallies, at what are supposed to be like cool, fun Christian rock concerts.
Except that it's rallies of 10,000 kids at 60 locations all over the country, right?
Right. And so the episode 2 is called Consumed by Call, which I would say, yeah. Yes. And then episode 3 is called Battle Cry. And that's where it's like, where these rallies now become like these much more explicitly political things. And so they're not just like cool concerts. They're about like taking over the culture, and like showing up at like the San Francisco City Hall to protest same-sex weddings or whatever. And then also about the alumni kind of bringing this thing down, not, and a lot of them not out of like a rejection of Jesus or a rejection of the church, but explicitly a rejection of kind of what was being deployed to build this group of very obedient, very willing to do literally whatever it takes.
Right. Willing to be martyred.
To be martyrs. And maybe literally, but certainly figuratively.
Yes.
A lot of like die to self language, a lot of the like you, and this is, you know, admittedly not unique here, but like being willing to do not just whatever God told you to do, but that whatever we tell you to do is what God is telling you to do.
Right.
And so you've got to be obedient to us, because being obedient to us is what it means to die to self and be obedient to God.
Right. Well, and that very militant language, that very much we're raising up an army for God. I mean, we grew up with that. I mean, and it starts so early. It starts so early in the church, but it also started, you know, when we were very, very young. Like, I mean, we were young, impressionable teenagers that wanted to go on the mission trip with the coolest 23-year-old we've ever known, right? Like, this was the thing all the kids were doing.
And this, so it starts, episode 1 really opens with all of these like former Honor Academy interns, describing their origin stories. And that was the, like, I had no idea what this was about. I had literally no idea. And then I'm listening to this and going, I looked at Sydney, because she was with me in the first watch. I had like pause it and like, honey, this is going to be a lot, because this was us.
This was me. This was how we lived. This was what our youth group looked like. I wore that outfit, like
and they all dress like us.
That like
some of it is like They all dress like us. It is, and like, it's not just like, oh, of course, like it's late 90s, early 2000s. No. This is like youth group kid outfits.
Yes.
This is the Jesus tees. This
Mm-hmm.
is
that looked like a Heinz ketchup bottle, but it
right.
was Jesus instead of whatever.
My favorite one was the Reese's peanut butter cup logo, please.
Yes, that looks like Jesus instead of Reese's. Yeah.
This is Jesus instead of Reese's. And so it is like, they look like us, they talk like us. Like Micah, who's kind of one of my favorite consistent voices throughout this, is like, yeah, like, for her it was like she'd lost her dad, and so like there was like real struggle in her life, and so she talks about like, I was in, this youth group was my family, and I'm like,
right.
yeah, this is how I'd processed being a depressed kid in the late 90s, early 2000s as well. My youth group also became my family. I was also at church like 6 days a week, still am at church 6 days a week, but now it's my job. It's totally
now we work there, right?
Now we live there. But like, it was like they come from these, for a lot of us who were in that end of the world. I think, both you and I are doing this at United Methodist churches. And so, I mean, at some point we might get to how that saved us in some real ways.
Right.
Or how that protected us in some real ways. But
right.
we were in that milieu of there was all of this language about like, oh, like we're supposed to be living differently. Oh, we're supposed to be living our faith really intensely. Oh, like there's something really interesting happening. And a lot of what episode 1 does also is it focuses on the music. And for me, like, I've talked about this a ton, like that for me, it was the music. Like, and they talk specifically about Jesus Freak by DC
Which
Talk.
was our anthem.
That
is our anthem.
Still is.
Right. Like I made a playlist for my husband after watching this, and I was like, you have to listen to the music that I listened to during this time to fully understand what we thought, what we were singing, the machine that we were raging against.
Yeah.
It's all in there.
Like, I can identify some like really important ways that my home church was like really good for me. And like, so many people loved me, and they certainly invested a lot in children and youth. And so I don't want to make this like I had this terrible home church experience. I didn't. But I also like that worship style I am never going to connect to.
Yeah.
It's never like and so for me, and this comes up a lot in episode 1 of like what was happening at these big Christian rock shows is, and Acquire the Fire essentially becomes like a really big example of that. But what was happening at these concerts, what was happening at these Christian music festivals, what becomes contemporary worship, was there was this sound, there was this intensity, there was this music that I really resonated with, and a lot of us really resonated with, and it was the intensity, because like I certainly didn't connect with the Smells and Bells, the hymns, I can tell you the ways that they're lyrically beautiful, I can tell you the ways they're technically excellent, even to this day, like I can tell you all these things, and I lead a traditional service at St. Stephen's now, and it's a beautiful service, and I know it speaks to a lot of people, but on some level it's never going to speak to me.
Right. But that music did.
But that music
really did. It was the Five Iron Frenzies. It was the Jesus Freak DC Talk. It was the
Audio Adrenaline,
POD,
Newsboys,
OC
Rev 1.
Yes.
Right. I mean, that was, I've told this story before on air, but when this was many churches ago. I was taking some of my youth to a Newsboys concert at Circuit of the Americas. And it was the Newsboys, and so this is in the kind of God's Not Dead era of Newsboys, and so now there's a member of Newsboys who was a member of DC Talk.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that concert, they did Jesus Freak, and like I'm like early 30s.
The emotion is still there.
And I'm like, I'm having a moment.
In.
And it was this. This is an example of when I finally realized I was an old man. because like the teenager next to me who's half my age is looking at me going, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, no, you don't understand, man, you weren't there. And I'm like, oh, I sound like all the aging rockers I grew up with who were trying to explain to me what it was like to follow the Grateful Dead, and I'm just like, I don't care, man. Have you heard the good news about DC Talk? I don't care about the Grateful Dead. This is our version of the Grateful Dead.
Yes. Well, and there was, I mean, I don't know. So I guess it was circulated through Lifeway or one of the, Family Christian store. I used to work for Family Christian store when I was that age. And so like there was a chart that I vividly remember that was, if you used to like this secular band, don't worry, you don't have to listen to that anymore. You can listen to this Christian version. And they had a chart listing it out. If you liked the Beatles, you do this. If you like ska, you do Five Iron Frenzy. If you like pop, you do this. If you like punk, you do this.
I know that Lifeway Christian stores also had those because the girl I was dating at that time worked at a Lifeway. And so I was spending I was the weird slacker just kind of like hanging. I never worked for the Lifeway Corporation. But there was she had weird rules around how long she was allowed to be out in the evening and strict curfews. And so how we got around a lot of that is then I would just start hanging out at this Lifeway. And so then we could hang out briefly so that she could then plausibly get away with getting home at a certain time. But then this is great purity culture logic. This is the tortured logic of purity culture, of all of this, of well, technically this is not breaking the rules because she didn't go somewhere else after work, but that's because I am just every day that she's working,
hanging out in the parking lot with her after work,
hanging out in the park, hanging out in the Lifeway while they're cleaning up, and then hanging out with her in the parking lot afterwards. But anyway, so I spent a lot of time at this Lifeway. It's an absurd amount of time at this Lifeway. Yeah, there was this chart, and then and the documentary goes through that the idea was to have these holy Christian alternatives to this secular culture that was that they viewed, and the quote in the show is secular culture was a gateway to the devil.
Right. Did you ever have to have a CD burning party?
So we never did, but I was aware of them.
Okay, so we had one. I remember talking about oh, I have to take my Beatles CD because they're the Antichrist. They sold their soul to the devil. So I'm not going to listen to this anymore. I'm gonna put it in the fire for Jesus.
So I certainly I had the these are the alternative music. Yeah, I again I was aware of these. Yeah, and I think there was enough of me that was that sounds weird.
It was. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
But the other thing the documentary talks about, there's this, this whole other alternative ecosystem of Christian celebrities, to which I go, yes, absolutely,
yes, there was,
and the bands, and it was this whole scene.
Movement,
and it was this whole scene and movement. Whether it was, we were not necessarily in the Ron Luce driven category, but it really was this we're going church up until now has not captured the intensity with which we should be feeling these things, the intensity to which we should be giving our lives to Jesus.
Right.
And this music, at least for me, was a huge deal in capturing that intensity. I am kind of just by my nature an intense person. And I was pretty sure that there was just really something I was missing in church. Still am, right? On some level, still am. But a lot of it was bouncing off me. I found it really boring. I found it kind of soulless.
Right.
And that music and the intensity, that very specific, because we've been to events more recently that have tried to recapture it, and it just feels like going through the motions. Those last two Christian music festivals we took youth to, and I haven't been back, and I haven't really felt the need to it.
Yeah,
it just felt even our youth were somewhat unaffected. It just felt because also it was largely bands either from Australia or from that era.
Yeah.
And Like, it just felt like we were going through the motions. But at that time,
because
we
can
like,
see behind the curtain now.
Yeah.
Like we can see it from the other side. And fortunately, we're raising our youth to think critically, and so they also could at that point.
But like, so they were doing like 60 of these stadium shows a year,
right?
And
thousands of kids.
And the whole idea of, and the whole pitch, and this is, I think, again, although we were not in the Ron Luce end of things, this is the pitch that we got to, is like, you know, this is a line from the show, is like, take your fire and change the world.
Right.
Right.
Go be on fire for God.
Go be on fire for God. And like, you're going to give your life. We're going to have the, like, we're going to have the altar call moment. Like, that's going to be like a big deal in this. And you're going to be surrounded by all these people that are having these incredibly emotional experiences. And this is, you know, one of those places where even like, as the depressed kid, like, I felt, you know, I've talked about like feeling a little cut off from some of that, but even still, like, you're in this like whole big moment,
hyper emotional,
very emotional. And the pitch is like, you're going to give your life to Christ, but it never stopped that you're going to give your life to Christ. You're going to give your life to Christ, and you're going to go change the world.
Right. You are going to be on fire for God so much that you are going to go and change the world, that you would be willing to be a martyr for God, that you are literally laying down your life to go for God.
So did you go to Youth 03 in Knoxville, Tennessee?
I did not.
So I did. So in this time period, this obviously isn't the documentary because it's not about the weird United Methodist end of this.
Right.
But in 2003, the United Methodist Church rented out like the entire University of Tennessee at Knoxville and summoned youth groups from presumably all over the world, but I certainly know all over the country, to get like tens of thousands of United Methodist youth on a college campus it wasn't a week, but like a week. And so I remember like we took a bus, and so like all of us got on this bus and we drove to Knoxville, Tennessee, and like the bus broke down, and then we got picked up by the First Baptist Church to Forest City, Arkansas. And so then we're riding in this like school bus for a while till we get our next bus. And we get there, and it is like classes during the day about finding your calling, and it's all still like, and I think some version of this still goes on, but like Youth 03 was very much like United Methodist Choir the Fire.
Okay.
Because it was like, and it was every night was a different big stadium show, and they paid the money to get name brand Christian artists. And like, it was this whole thing. And it was that, like, again, like a different message, but also not a different message, right? It very much was like, you're going to give your life to Christ, and we're going to be the generation that goes out and changes the world.
Right. Like, this was our calling as a youth, right? This was, we are the rebellion. We are going to make sure that the whole world hears about God. This is what we do. It sounds like, because really the only reason that we didn't end up at the Honor Academy is because we didn't go to Acquire the Fire, right? We just didn't get invited. But had we been, that would have been us.
Right. So here's what would have happened to both of us.
Right.
And like, this is where we just have to be entirely honest, right? So, so again, the kind of general flow is Acquire the Fire is the big stadium shows, of which there were many of this kind going on, again, including Youth 03, hosted by the United Methodist Church.
Yes.
Okay, so this was just like a thing that was happening. And the documentary doesn't really get into this, but the Acquire the Fire was hardly unique. I think their intensity was unique, but again, like, I went to a lot of shows that looked and felt something like this, again, including one hosted by the UMC.
Yeah.
And so the idea was then you go on the global expeditions, mission trips, which was like a 1 to 2 month experience in the developing world to do that kind of very evangelical, bring people to Christ kind of mission work. And then if you like really love that, then you can join the real stuff, the Honor Academy. And here's what would have happened to both of us. Both of us would have miraculously heard the call that we should definitely go on a global expedition.
Yep.
Why do I know this? Because we did similar things later in our lives.
Yes, we both did missions later in our lives.
We later in our lives did perhaps more effective and sane versions of this, because when I went to Paraguay for multiple months, or Kenya for multiple months, I was not going with the coolest 23-year-old ever. I was going through a highly planned operation through Emory University, and I was at that point like fully consenting adult. I was in my mid to late 20s, but I also taught for America,
skills.
right? Yeah. When in undergrad, wanting to like make a difference before I go to grad school, what did I pick? I picked the second most intense version of that. The only more intense version of that is the Peace Corps. I just didn't do the Peace Corps because I was getting married. And so I didn't do the Peace Corps. William & Mary was much more of a Teach for America school at that time. Berkeley was the big Peace Corps school at the time. And so I had a lot of people joining Teach for America. And what did I do? I taught for America. And then what did I do? I went to Kenya. And then what did I do? I went to Paraguay. And then what I do? I became an ordained United Methodist elder. So guess what? I was going on that global expedition and I was joining the Honor Academy.
And you were going to the Honor Academy, right? Then we just went to seminary instead of Honor Academy.
We just went to seminary
instead. This is just,
which is healthier.
Yes.
But like, I think one of the things I resonate with the most listening to the former Honor Academy interns is they are all wired the way you and I are wired, which is if there's a thing, we must go do the most intense version of that because that's what the real stuff is.
Right. We still preach like this. We still teach like this. We do weird services in basements so that we can teach about the persecuted church, right? Like we do ministry to the extreme. I
mean, because... I wonder, is my rejection of the concept of a demon because I just think it's not intense enough? Right? Like, so I'm in this journey of like, do I go back to grad school? And there is this like very natural like next step in an academic journey. And I reject it on site because there's a more intense thing. It's called a PhD.
Yep.
I'm still at it.
But yes, that is where we would have ended up if we had only been invited to Acquire the Fire. Thank goodness we weren't.
We just weren't.
Right.
And I think that's where this hits really hard for me, is I hear and see who we were. I don't want to be clear, like we didn't know each other then, but
no.
we're from
the culture that we grew up in.
We know, right? Like, and then I think this is true. I know this is true of me, and we've been at this long enough that I'm pretty sure it's true of you too. That we both would have just signed on the line.
Yes.
Because we never met. The thing that saved us is the United Methodist Church never introduced us to Ron Luce. That's the thing. That is the only thing.
Yes. Well, and I feel like there are some denominations that probably had some hedges of like protective mechanisms for that. Like we have a book of discipline.
And we have a safe sanctuary.
And we have safe sanctuary.
So a lot of this then becomes these like eventually what the Honor Academy dissolves into is these intensely abusive experiences where people are being shamed for even the most minor infractions of like you kissed a boy once and you get kicked out, or these like Navy SEAL type experiences where you're again crawling through a 30-foot long tunnel under 10 feet of earth filled to your shoulders with water covered in hissing cockroaches.
Right. Eating mealworms or fasting because you don't make them enough money that day.
Right. And one of the things that was already in place by the time that we were youth within the United Methodist Church is what's called Safe Sanctuary. And that has like that starts out as like specifically trying to prevent sexual exploitation of minors, which is definitely still a part of that program. But it also then becomes a program about preventing like spiritual abuse and spiritually manipulative environments. Yes. And so we came up in a world with a few more guardrails. And I think that's part of what
saved us.
What saved us.
Yes.
Is we had a world where like, although, some of the like weird stuff we did in youth group, it's probably a little overly intense. Maybe, but like nowhere to near this degree, right? Probably the most intense thing we did was 30-hour famine.
Right.
Which was, very popular at this time. It may still be going on. I don't know, but it certainly was going on kind of early to late 2000s. And that's where like, you don't eat for 30 straight hours
Mm-hmm.
and you do some sort of service project to like connect yourself to people who are starving in the developing world, and you're raising money for the people who are starving. I think it was a program through World Vision or
Yes.
one of its ilk. And that's like intense, but then even that's intense with guidelines.
With
and
guidelines,
like no one was,
and juice fasts and health reasons, and yeah.
and no one was like shouting at me that I, when we were like hungry, that like, oh, you shouldn't be hungry, or even there were guardrails that just the Honor Academy kids just didn't have, because it turns into this just utter abuse fest. But so like there was this like real language in Ron Luce's work, but also just that I think we interpreted, that we caught at the time too, that like, you're gonna be used by God to change the world. Do you, this is where the line, do you want to go around the world with the coolest 23-year-old you've ever met?
Right.
They
all the cool kids are doing it. This was all the cool kids are doing it, Christian version.
All the cool kids are doing it. And what the cool kids are doing is they're becoming people who are going to change the world for Jesus. And that's the bit that I feel hook, line, and sinker. That's the bit that like, and so they, on their trip, like they did things like smuggle Bibles and like doing these like weird mime shows that were somehow going to save people's souls, and they were given, and that, I think that's the other piece that I certainly didn't experience when we went on mission trips. And we did go on mission trips. We went to Army, which the more you think about it is an intense name. It's United Methodist Action Reach Out Mission by youth, but it is named in this milieu, right? That is a name thoroughly out of this milieu. It still exists.
Very, very militant, yes.
I still send my youth to it because what you do is you go and you have reasonably intense worship services, but with guide rails, and you work in people's houses and you make a difference often in a small rural community. Actually, we're working on hosting one here in Houston this February. To open up another opportunity, because there's some real struggling neighborhoods just north of us that we've talked about before, Acres Homes. And so there's some real opportunities there. But like that was our version of it. This was the very much go out and save them souls. And it was through these like weird mime shows. It was there was a lot of like you're a world changer by going and being a mime. And like, if you even move when you're the mime, you might distract someone and then they won't hear the word of God and then they'll go to hell.
They'll go to hell because you moved when you were supposed to be still. Right.
And that, I never got that part.
Right.
They certainly did.
Yeah.
The part I did get is they would talk about it all became competitive suffering.
Right.
For these youth going on these global expeditions, I can do this. It became competitive suffering, and I think of I don't know that bit ever left me either. Like, I think that's the other piece that lingers in me too, in some ways, right? Like I talked before, like I didn't take a pillow with me to Kenya. Why? Like why? Other than it's like, oh, I don't really need it. But I'm going to live there for months. Right. And so I was using my messenger bag and my rain jacket, and that was my pillow. And then I did the same thing in Paraguay at first, and eventually like I spent $7 or $8 US and I bought a pillow. I was like, oh yeah, this is way better actually. But I did that for this stuff, right? Like this is, it's all the same.
This is the martyrdom that you incorporated, was the don't take a pillow part.
I didn't take a pillow because I didn't need it. Because because I'm somewhere deep down, despite my mountains of physical junk, have internalized the aesthetic, being an aesthetic, right? Like the like self-flagellating nature of the rhetoric of this time.
Right. It was very much a die to your physical self in order to become more spiritual, so that you could become closer to God, so that you could go and save the world. That's what a soldier of Christ would do, right? That is what the army of God would do.
And so that carries us most of the way through episode 1. And I think I know for me, Like episode 1, like even I'm just looking at my notes that I have in front of me, right? Like episode 1 is the one like I resonate the most with, because it is
Right.
about how Acquire the Fire and Global Expeditions was like in line with this hyper intense, like, go be a world changer for Christ. There will be suffering. You must be ready to suffer. Like leaning into the martyrdom a little bit, some. Right. And like I deeply internalized all of that.
Right. Well, and it's in all the lyrics of the music.
Yep.
Even our beloved Jesus Freak, it talks about martyrdom. It talks about, I mean, all of
So the
it.
king
Boom
took the
goes
head
the
of this
dynamite.
Jesus, right? I mean, it's the
Exactly.
it's the the verse on John the Baptist, right?
Right. Or are you going to stand on a box in the middle of the city and preach the name? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but like, yeah, I mean, literally, there is that line in the John the Baptist verse that is, until the king took the head of this Jesus freak.
Yep. But it's in all of them.
It's in all of them.
It's all about the persecution that you're going to receive and how that is going to make your walk with God better.
And yes. And so that's also why we're talking about this.
Yeah.
We just finished what is probably the most intense sermon series I've ever written.
It's a pretty intense one. We've been preaching some pretty intense things in this podcast lately.
And we've been trying, as ever, we're trying to be true to Scripture. There is an intensity to Jesus. There's an intensity to the Old Testament.
Inspiring to go and live differently, right? Like this is the core of that message is not wrong. Like the core of the beginning of Teen Mania was not wrong, I would say, when they were calling others to follow God more intensely, to let that relationship with God change your actions so that you then go and do good things in the world. Not wrong. Still the message we're preaching today. Still
a thing that I hold deeply within myself.
Yes.
But I also, in watching this documentary, and I started watching it kind of after having written the series, kind of midway through delivering it, and sitting there and kind of also feeling convicted by that of I can, and I talked about this a little bit in the pulpit in the midst of this series, having first watched this documentary, but then wanting to like kind of really dig into it, is like this I can be really intense, because part of it is I do resonate with the intensity of that era.
Yes.
Because I also think the intensity of that era is in some ways in line with the intensity felt by the biblical authors and the people living out the Old, and certainly living out the New Testament, but I think living out parts of the Old Testament too. This I think that is the intensity felt by people like Esther and people like Daniel, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Joseph, both of them. This is Paul did live a life where he was constantly dodging trouble, right? Peter and John, Acts of the Apostles is, all of the martyrs.
Yes.
And it is, kind of the ending scenes of Acts when we're getting towards the end of Paul's life is Paul unwilling to argue for himself in the court with Herod Antipas, and ending up on the road to Rome to be end up being executed outside the walls. And we shouldn't rather knock all of the intensity out of that.
Right.
But there are limits. And also that intensity, what this documentary ends up being about is it is probably more willing to reject the intensity than I am. Be honest about that.
Yeah.
But it is this like stark warning of what can happen when we misuse that.
Right. When power goes unchecked.
Because I probably would have gone into a tunnel 10 feet underground, that's 30 feet long, covered in hissing cockroaches. Like I probably would have done that.
Yep.
And that's crazy.
That
I
is
mean, some of the
insane.
stuff we did end up doing is crazy.
Probably.
Not like that. Not to
No.
that degree. I didn't become a soldier. I became a spy. Please. But like,
One step over.
one
Trey,
step over.
one step over.
I was running operational security. It kept us very safe. But like, it also is like something that we've been talking about kind of on and off for the past year. Is it's also this reminder of like, be really careful how you deploy the power that you do have.
Yes.
Be
and
really
the words
careful.
that you use.
The words that you use, and
Mhm.
who are you demanding obedience to?
Right.
Because I kind of did this in the kind of the setup of this is we're in the Honor Academy. The pitch is we need to be like just so obedient to God, and we need to be willing to go where God sends us, and we need to be willing to like live out our faith in an intense and devoted way, comma, to God, comma,
To God.
to be a part of God's great, they wouldn't use this word, they use world changers, but you know, I'm a United Methodist, to be a part of God's great transformation of the world. And that statement I just made is what I've been preaching for 8 weeks.
Decades now.
In some ways, what I've been preaching for 13 years.
Yep.
I believe that part. But the object of all of that is God. The object relationship in all of that is God. What happens with Ron Luce and the Honor Academy in particular is it stops being about God and starts being specifically about what the leadership of the Honor Academy is telling them to do. Right? You signed up for this year-long internship where you're going to be part of making all of Teen Media happen. For some people, that meant they were on the worship team. And for some people, that meant they were the coolest 23-year-old ever. And for some people, that meant they made tater tots for a year for Jesus.
Yep.
And they got told, if they complained, hey, you need to be more faithful. You need to be faithful with little, and then you might be opportunity to be faithful with a lot. Great biblical quote. And told to die to self.
Right.
As a way of devoting yourself to God, because I'm telling you to make tater tots, and that's what God wants you to do. And that's the like the real problematic leap.
Yeah. Or that I'm telling you to be a telemarketer for God. Right. That was the other funny thing of the cubicles and the telemarketing and the making the phone calls to the, to get more recruits, because you got to feed people into this machine.
You got to feed people and money in the machine. And by the way, these interns are paying for it.
Right. And being paid to work, or paying to work for this machine.
It is applying all of this, like, admittedly very biblical, but also very intense theology, and using it not just as a obedience to what you discern God is saying in your life, a thing that I push comes to shove, I do believe, and making it about that. Therefore, you must be totally obedient to us, and then that's where it becomes abuse.
Well, and the shame and the guilt that is internalized, which can lead to the depression that plagued so many of them, because they couldn't live up to the standard, or they would do the thing, but they'd feel awful. And if you felt awful, that meant that you didn't really have, God helping you. Right. And so
so that's where like
listening
to Micah's story in particular is just one that, it's depressed kid sees depressed kid, right?
Yeah.
Micah talks about like she's in this program, she's doing all the things she could possibly do that's right. And she's just getting more and more and more and more depressed. Like she's doing all the right things.
Yes.
And never getting the quote unquote correct outcome. Yes. Welcome to my experience in organized religion. Yes.
Right. Because if I'm going through all those motions and I'm reading all the scriptures and I'm having my quiet times and I'm in church 7 days a week and
she goes to somebody for help, and what she gets is you need to go to church more.
Yep.
And she's like, and then she makes an amazingly brave decision. She leaves. I think the line she uses something like I'm not gonna she wasn't gonna survive, and so she left.
Right.
But then she talked about the loss of community and the pain and suffering. And that caused him, like, I can resonate with all of that.
Right, because if that is your whole world, your whole community, all of your friendships are built in that, you have nothing else, then to leave is incredibly brave.
I'm going to talk in slightly obfuscational terms for my own personal life, but like, those are questions I've had to contemplate in the past, 5-6 years of my own life,
Mhm.
of, doing all of the right churchy things, um, you know, ordained United Methodist elder, um, serving in all the ways that I'm supposed to,
Mhm.
and finding myself still utterly depressed,
Right.
still just unavoidably just lost.
Mhm.
And it was, I'll nod at some stuff. It was even a season where ministry was going relatively well. It wasn't even, it wasn't even the darkest of days.
Yeah.
And having to wrestle with that, like, and having the access I needed to help be really difficult.
Yeah.
And I think it sounded like Micah had to bear this a lot more by herself. I was really blessed. I had y'all. I had my family. I
Mm.
had my wonderful therapist David. And so I have my friends who are like my family. And so eventually, like, I was able to get to a place where I could both, I think, find what I really was looking for, was
Mhm.
needing, um, and still hold on to this glorious calling.
Yes.
But like, but I can, I hear, I understand that journey that Micah had to go on.
Well, and I feel like some of our professional ministry has been pulling people out of the everything has to be a hyper emotional
Yep.
experience or it's not real.
Yep.
Like teaching the next generation that you don't have to be this, you don't have to cry at worship. That doesn't mean the Holy Spirit's not moving in
Right.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Tur- Turns out that there was so one of the people on this documentary is a reporter for Rolling Stone.
Mhm.
And he's great because it just turns out that, like, that's just what we didn't know is that's just what rock concerts are like.
Right.
But we hadn't been to them because we were 12.
Right. We
Right?
didn't we didn't
know.
and then we thought we weren't allowed to listen to those kind of
Right,
music.
then
So why would we?
and like, I have a grass allergy, so I didn't go to a lot of like that kind of rock show.
Right.
And so this was our rock and roll.
This was our rock and roll.
And so
and this
what we
was the
didn't
emotional
know is
lever that was tugging on our heartstrings.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we thought the Holy Spirit was.
Right.
But in actuality,
it's not.
It's way bigger than that. And it's not always like that. And we've been in places where people have said, well, I just don't feel the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
And I'm like, really? Because I do.
Right.
But I'm not crying every Sunday. Okay, was that a requirement? Like,
well,
that's not always how this works.
And for me, like, I think this journey of kind of trying to disentangle, like, the ways I'm shaped by this era is, I don't want to let go of my, the Bonhoeffer in my head. Right. And then this is, by the way, this isn't coming in the documentary either, but this is also the ways that, like, why Dietrich Bonhoeffer's family ends up objecting to how Dietrich Bonhoeffer gets hijacked by kind of a certain kind of American, kind of right-wing leaning Christian.
Right.
Because he fits into this kind of, the whole point is to be the martyr, blah, 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 blah. And he, I'm not sure he set out to be a martyr. He ends up a martyr, but that I don't like. He certainly calls, and we talk about him a lot, and he is, and this documentary has not shaken loose that, like, that, but like letting Bonhoeffer be the intensity and not the music.
Right.
But like, I think I've tried to disentangle the intensity from the hyper emotionality of it all. And I spend a lot more of my own, like, spiritual life. This is going to sound weird because it's me in, like, quiet contemplation. So much of my spiritual life now happens as I'm writing. And like, I think part of coming out of this is when I started this journey 25 years ago, I would have told you that the only way that I really experienced God was in these shows. And now I don't really experience God in these shows. I sometimes experience God still listening to some of the music in my own space.
Yes.
But I spend a lot more time seeing God in the life of the church and in my own personal life, in the interaction I have with God as I'm writing. Is, you know, not to be a little highfalutin, it's still me as I practice my art. I mean, I'm a writer, right? Maybe not a good one, but I am one.
Right.
I'm a professional writer. Does not it does not imply you're any good. It only implies you get paid, and I get paid to write.
There you go.
But like it is, and because like watching this play out, I recommend watching it. It's on, I guess I didn't explain. It's on Amazon Prime.
Right.
And so if you pay Uncle Jeff his money every year, you too can go watch this. I recommend it. Each episode's like 45, 50 minutes long. You know,
and they're great.
They're very well done. There's even more in there. There's a lot about James Dobson that I'm not interested in.
There's a whole lot about.
And I think the documentary ends up kind of framing some of like modern right-wing politics around this, and that's again not the angle of this show, just not the angle that I really connected with, because that's not what happened to me.
Right, just not our arena.
It's not
the part that happened to us was in episodes 1 and 2.
Yeah,
No.
Well,
we lived that part,
and or also just recognizing the things that almost happened to us, that could have happened to us.
Yes,
and go ahead.
So I was going back through some of my old journals from this era, and like listening to like some of this was sermon notes that I had written down, not just youth group sermons, but like a sermon from our senior pastor. And I had written down a direct quote from him where he said, "The church is not a cruise ship, it's a battleship."
Yeah. Right. And
the whole sermon was based around like, we are on a mission from God. You are a soldier. You are it was very like militant language, like, and I agree with the sentiment that we are not meant to sit on our laurels. Like, we are meant to go and do. We do have a mission as Christians to go into the world, to love, to serve, to seek and save the lost. But I would not say we are a battleship so much as that we are Doctors Without Borders. Yeah. We're a rescue mission.
Christos Medicos, man.
Right.
I mean, I often use the phrase in our own work that we're an outpost. Each church is meant to be an outpost of the kingdom of God.
Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
Like, remember the military in the New Testament's the bad guys, largely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a line in the blog that Micah makes that ends up bringing down Teen Mania. It's gone. By the way, it was based in Lindale, Texas, very near where we lived in Palestine.
Where we did, yep. Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, I recognize this. And there's like the very remote Lindale, Texas, and I'm like, having lived out there, Lindale doesn't feel remote.
Doesn't.
It's on
Feels
I-20.
like home. Yep.
Nothing on I-20 gets to feel that remote. You know, Crockett, that's remote.
Maybe.
Maybe Alto south of Rusk. But like Micah builds this blog that ends up like telling the truth and bringing Teen Mania down, as they talk about just the wild excesses of the Honor Academy in particular.
Right.
It doesn't sound like Global Expeditions was particularly safe either, but it was not the like machine of human misery and control that the Honor Academy
intense militant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But like there was a blog post title that just like flashed across the screen that was like, Jesus was not in the military. Never forget, Jesus was not in the military.
Correct.
And
nor would Jesus have been in the military.
And so it is a reminder that when the church had literal militaries, it was not necessarily the high point of our expression in the world. It was the Crusades.
Yes. Yeah. My Catholic, upbringing husband, I was like, we never did that in the Catholic Church. I said, yes, you did.
Yes, you did. You said
it was the Crusades. You weren't born then, but you did the same thing.
You did this.
A long time ago.
You did this.
You got it done a lot earlier than we did.
And frankly, at a scale we can't even imagine.
Right. Ours was a culture war. Yours was a literal war.
Literal war. Because you were the largest government on earth.
Right.
But, and so, and also, I think that's a good point, that in some ways these things have always been with us.
Right.
But I am reminded that the ways, I think this is similar to the last episode of Cut the Crap we've been able to do so far, where we talked about the like ways that the intensity of kind of the rhetoric of conflict
Yes.
that we were involved in the split between the GMC and the UMC
Yes.
ends up inadvertently 6 ways down the road, leading to literal, death and violence in Nigeria.
Yep.
Right, and then that's like, and then there's a lot of other structural factors that a bunch of dumb 30-somethings from Texas have nothing to do with,
Right.
other than we played into the escalation of this, and there were consequences.
Yes.
I think this is why this discussion at all is this interesting coda to this like highly intense sermon series is a reminder of there is real danger in that intensity. That intensity isn't value neutral. And I think there's a couple of things. We need to make sure that always that intensity is about an obedience to God.
Yes.
And it's an intensity that also allows for the thing that God definitely allows for, which is grace.
Yes.
Like there is this, and this kind of comes up across all 3 episodes. But there was this, especially among the Honor Academy folks, they talk about being in a system where they could literally never be enough.
Yeah.
That the point was perhaps that the level of devotion required was impossible. It was literally impossible. But the only way to overcome that was to try harder. And that's not
the message.
That's not like that's as old, that's a heresy as old as Pelagius.
Right. But that's also the one that saved us, is the United Methodist emphasis on grace.
Yeah.
Right.
That we're only semi-Pelagian.
Right. No, you are not enough, but that is where God's grace comes in. And it's okay. And so to not have to bear the shame and the weight and the guilt of all of that, of not being enough.
And it's not a competitive race.
Right.
It's not a competition of any kind.
Not a competition of suffering.
It's not a competition of suffering. Although, John Wesley and his friends can be accused of that as much as anybody. Yep. Right? John Wesley, all these guys who live in my head, right, are in, in that school of intensity, right?
Of asceticism.
You can frame the Holy Club as a bunch of college guys getting together and doing Christian competitive suffering. That's probably not an Orthodox Wesleyan view. I'm probably I might get a heretic, but that is a way that you can frame the Holy Club.
Yep.
And so to always, like, it's about obedience to God, and that regardless of what someone is shouting at you, God does not expect you to become instantly perfect.
Nope.
And God doesn't expect you to do this on your own. And God knows and is okay with and loves you in the midst of a journey that's always going to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And if anyone is shoving you down a tunnel 10 feet underground that's 30 feet long and filled mostly with water, covered in hissing cockroaches, that's probably not God.
That's probably not God.
That's probably not God.
Nope.
Telling you that you have to do this. Because that's also not a representative sample of the ways in which serving God is difficult in the world anyways.
Nope.
Like, it's not.
Can't say that I've ever had to do that in service to Christ.
No, I mean, we've done like some weird, messy games with youth that have turned me into a human cake.
Right.
But I chose to do that.
Pies in between my toes at one point. Yeah. Like weird stuff happens, but not
like
the
that.
Psychological warfare that was happening at the Honors Academy.
And even the, like, there are people who have ended up suffering in the name of God. I mean, that is a thing that happens.
Yes.
But I have become deeply skeptical in my life of the people who will look at you and tell you to suffer, especially when they have the option to ameliorate your suffering and do not.
Yes.
When I was a 21-year-old intern for I guess I won't name the name of the organization, but I was working for a parachurch organization in Charlottesville, Virginia. We were running a Christian day camp. And like also there was like academic support stuff. It was a cool summer program. It was, splitting my summer between being in Russia, working on helping plant a church in Piatigorsk. And I was, when I got back from Russia, then I was going to work in Charlottesville, and then I was leaving for England, all after having convinced my girlfriend to get an apartment with me in Williamsburg, Virginia, a place I was not going to be for the better part of 6 months. I've got a cat. This is the origin story of Elliot the cat as well. But so that they ran out of the ability to pay us. Or they were kind of banking on the fact that they were going to pay us at the end of the summer. And for some folks, they had like ongoing bills that would not allow them to just go 3 months without a paycheck.
Right.
I want to say for the record, we did end up getting paid, but we were not getting paid incrementally because they literally like opened up the summer without the money to pay all of us. And we're just kind of hoping that they'd fundraise enough that by the end of the summer, they'd be able to pay us. And so I somehow ended up the only intern in the meeting with the board. There was a lot of organizing around. We're going to talk to the board. We're going to talk to the board. Trey, go talk to the board. I don't.
That seems to happen to you fairly often, though. You're the professional talker.
Literally the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Trey, go talk to the board. Hey, Trey, go talk to the conference. Hey, Trey, go be a jerk in public. Anyways. And so I end up in this room. And basically they told me, the board told me that, hey, sometimes suffering is part of this Christian process. And even as a 21-year-old intern, I quit back, but like, don't we have a responsibility to take care of each other? Yes.
Yes, we do.
Like sometimes we may all be called upon to do hard things for Jesus. Now that hard thing will probably not involve hissing cockroaches. I'm not saying I can't guarantee it won't, but it probably won't involve hissing cockroaches or involve God telling you to abuse thousands of teenagers to make them ready to be martyrs. I don't think that's what it is, right?
Nope.
Because we all are meant to care for each other. And this is still challenged by choice. Yes, God, we're not automatons.
Right.
God calls on us to do things. Yes. Our obedience is to God, not at our core obedience. Obey traffic laws, keep your court dates. Don't just tell your boss to stuff it for no reason. But you are opting into that. You are opting into all authority.
To all of it.
All of it, including divine authority. You are opting in to divine authority. That's part of the thing that makes this system fair, is you're opting into divine authority. Also we have a responsibility to care for one another. Also, God has grace. Anyways, if you have thoughts on happy strange people, hold on, any closing thoughts, Emily?
I mean, yeah, it's great to look into this and to have a representation of our childhood in documentary form so that I can explain to the people in my life who were not there and did not live it to go, yes, that is where that comes from. That part of me that you don't quite understand, this is where that's its origin story.
This is what we looked like. This is what we sounded like. This is what we felt like.
This is what we listened to.
Yep.
This is how we are. This is how we are, who we are today. Yeah. Still, this is what shaped us.
This is why I taught for America.
Yeah.
This is why I went to Kenya. This is why I went to Paraguay.
I would love to know if there are any Teen Mania survivors. I hate to say alumni. Survivors seems a more appropriate term. I would love their thoughts on this show. If they're listening to this, please write to us. I would love to hear your story.
But also, if you were just in that general evangelical teen movement, if you went to Youth 03, I wonder,
or another similar type of rally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All of that, thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com, thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with a regular episode. This was kind of I had a weird dogleg in the schedule anyways, and we were both, I think, really motivated to talk about this thing.
Yes.
And if you want us to do more of this, also email in. I always kick around the idea. I mean, at one point I made Emily watch season 1 of The Righteous Gemstones. Which
sure did. It's a lot of nudity.
I'm going to be honest, and I think I said this at the time, more nudity than I remembered.
Yeah. Or if you have suggestions like that for the show, let us know.
If there are other things you would like to have us watch, and particularly documentaries, and then talk about, as we kind of have weird scheduling gaps, I'm really open to that. Also, the goodness of God pod at gmail.com. We are the Divine Provisions Co., and clearly we need your help.
Clearly.
Like, comment, subscribe, leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. If you'd like more of what we do, you can find us at Divine Provisions Co. on most places. TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, YouTube, at Divine Provisions Co. And at divineprovisions.co on the interwebs. Go in peace. Love and serve the Lord. And we'll see you next time.